So I have noticed a small group of people. Actually, it's not even a small group of people, it's a very large group of people. And you might be in this group of people. I've noticed that there are a group of people who specifically date somebody who is more toxic than they are and more emotionally messed up than they are. And the reason why they do that is simply because they can be the victim in the relationship. And so, because they want to be the victim in the relationship, it puts them in a position whereby they do not have to do any type of emotional work on their part in order to improve the relationship. And so, if you're dating somebody who, let's say, has gone through a considerably higher amount of trauma than you have, you do not have to do a lot of work to outshine that person emotionally. You just have to show up. And so, because you have this group of people, and because they specifically target people who are worse than they are, they do not have to do any type of emotional work for themselves in order for them to improve. But I noticed this when a girl started dating a friend of mine, and he had come from a slightly traumatic past, and he was a pretty toxic boyfriend. But over time, what ended up happening was she used to complain about him being toxic, about him not being consistent, and about so many other things. But he decided to get his shit together. So he kind of went to therapy, he started reading books on emotional intelligence, and he started to slowly improve himself. Over time, he got better at regulating his emotions, being patient and being consistent, and being a better lover to her. However, the better he became, the worse she looked. And this was simply because she was not doing any type of work to improve herself, because she was relying on the fact that he was inadequate in so many ways. But when he became better, it was forcing her to also become better in order for the relationship to continue. But what ended up happening was they actually ended up breaking up simply because the girl did not want to go through the 1.5 years of painful growth that he put himself through in order for her to remain in the relationship. And so, me and my friends noticed something, that there are a lot of girls who are not willing to do the necessary work to be with you on an emotional level. And so they would rather date toxic guys and be in toxic relationships so they can consistently be the victims of these guys. And so they can consistently point the finger at this guy that they are with simply because they don't want to go through the headache of doing the work. And the challenge with this is that you end up in a scenario whereby you have a lot of guys being picked by women who are emotionally better than them, and then those guys are essentially turned into punching bags, or they're turned into, basically the blame game is all around them. They're constantly being blamed for everything. And then those women who pick out those guys populate this type of information and knowledge and try and blanket it over every guy in the world. And yet those women have systematically avoided good men. And the same thing can be said about men. There are a lot of men who do not want to do the work, and because they don't want to do the work, they try and get a woman who is emotionally, maybe not physically, but emotionally on a lower playing field than he is. And these types of people are very toxic to the dating world because they seek out somebody who is less than, and then they use that person as an emotional punching bag and as an emotional blaming bag for all of their life problems and for all of their relationship problems. Oh, she doesn't know how to communicate, or he doesn't know how to communicate, he's emotionally inconsistent. And so, because they consistently pick people who are less than them, and they consistently are making these choices intentionally, so that they always come out looking like the victim in a lot of these relationships. There are a lot of people who get punched down on simply because they do not have the same level of emotional intelligence, or they do not share, or they share a more traumatic history than everybody else. And so instead of us cutting these people some slack, we end up in a society where we are constantly blaming those people, and on top of that, taking what we have learned from those people and blanketing and putting it as a blanket over everyone. And so the challenge with that is that you end up in a society with people who are constantly playing the victim game simply because they do not want to date better. And because they are afraid of dating better, they are afraid of looking like the toxic one in the relationship, they are afraid of looking like the emotionally unavailable one, the inconsistent one, and the incompetent one in the relationship. And so, if you are ever in a situation whereby somebody who is considerably better than you is trying to date you for the sake of using you as an emotional punching bag and trying to use you as somebody they can blame all of their troubles and problems on, get out of that relationship. Or put in the work and get better yourself.